each other since, I think, almost 30 years.
Yes.
And we have a lot of experience, share a lot of experience in Asia and
Right.
working on air pollution situation in Asia. And how would you characterize your main experiences over this last 30 years?
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, it's been 30 years. And first, I'd like to say it's this particular moment in time that we're talking about and seeing kind of this awareness of the health impacts of air pollution is tremendous. And we're exploring all these solution spaces. But as you said, 30 years ago when we were collaborating, the use of air quality models, which is what I do, is my specialty, is to use those models to link emissions to ambient concentrations. We explored that, and at that time, you were leading it, as you are today, in terms of using that in an integrated assessment mode and how you can link that to policy. And in some way, it's remarkable because I think the spaces the tools we put together then are what's being used now, but much better. And we explored the solution space that is now presently available to us. But I guess my question overall, and I'll give it back to you, is why now is everything coming together in a very exciting way? It's timely. There's a sense of urgency, but why now?
So that's a good question. I think there are two mechanisms coming together. The first one is already in the 1990s, our first analysis was a foresight analysis,
Yep.
and we were thinking how could the economic development, which we believe that will happen in the future, how would this affect air quality? And we were somehow seeing already the effects currently.
Right.
And many of these trends materialized actually in the last 30 years. To a situation where it is, pollution becomes visible.
Mm-hmm.
It was not only invisible, it was really in the meantime in Asia, when you see it in all the newspapers in many places, we have these pollution episodes.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is one important element that it became visible, and this was supported by also the availability of monitoring data, which were suddenly becoming public.
Yeah.
Before, the data are either unavailable or they were confidential. But in the last 5 years, 10 years maybe, data on air qualities in the cities have been made public, and this turned out, in some countries at least, as a strong driver to take action against air pollution.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think another factor that is at play now is our recognition of cities as such important factors of where the pollution is the worst, but also the political will is the best. And and at the time, 30 years ago, we really didn't have the tools to look at urban environments, but we do now. And so I think that's one factor. And then I think the other thing that our work collectively and our work represents is also a better understanding of scale, right? It's not, we came into it kind of the regional scale, but now the more focus is on how do we improve, individuals' exposure. And so, it's not, we can't just do it in the cities. So, there's all this contributions from local versus distant sources, and we have a better understanding of that now.
Right. And I think this is one of the important aspects throughout the world actually, but also especially in developing countries, where now the belief is that pollution is worst in the cities. But I think, yes, there are the most people living in the cities, but I have to say that we have very few monitoring data of what's going on in the villages. Yeah. And I think this is an aspect which is undetected at the moment, and where also many pollution sources, first people in the countryside are suffering from this, but also this pollution from the villages is polluting the cities, and vice versa. So there's a very strong connection in the atmosphere between the cities and the rural areas where people are still living in poverty.
I think the other thing that's changed in the 30 years is that, this integrated assessment of emissions and to policy and economic choices, that was made then. But the world in some sense has gotten more complicated, right? Because we now have this recognition of it's not just air pollution or deposition for ecosystems, but it's the climate system altogether. So we have more concerns, and only maybe the same valves to change, but energy and other things. But yeah, so policy it's exciting, right?
Yeah, I think over time, I think also our perspective has changed. That before, originally, we were looking at air pollution as a rather sectoral issue with narrow focused policies and policy interventions, which delivered some improvements. But the more we look into the situation, the more we understand the interlinkages between the sources of air pollution, and especially of the measures or the solutions which could improve the air pollution, and the benefits these solutions deliver to other human well-being aspects, not only health, not only climate, but there are so many other aspects which are really relevant for people. And this understanding has really only evolved in the last few years. And I think it opens up a completely new dimension for the future, and will make achieving clean air much easier, because countries will find much more support for the policies.
Another thing I find really interesting is, when we were working and continue to work, we had the air quality community, the emissions community, the policy communities together, the air quality controls. But we always produced these. It was hard to engage kind of stakeholders and impacts people. And, the health, we always knew air pollution was an issue, and engaging the health community to do assessments has been, it's been difficult to engage them fully. And in the last few years, with things like the global burden of disease and others, that community and meetings like this are bringing the communities much closer together. And I think that's a real positive step moving forward. And I think there's lessons to be learned about why did it take so long, but but we can build on that. So.